Hello, Soul Story Adventurers. This is Rose Diamond from Tribe in Transition. And this is the third of a series of short videos I'm making to explore the soul journey or the journey of transition to a higher state of consciousness. And in the previous two, I've talked about how often when we're about to make a big shift in consciousness, when we're about to move into a new stage of consciousness or set off on a new chapter of our soul journey, this is preceded by a period of discontentment and disillusionment. And I've also talked about how our greatest gifts are often intimately intertwined with our greatest suffering. So sort of out of the ground of our suffering, our gifts arise. And in the last video, I mentioned how on one particular occasion, a very sad occasion, I'd been driving down visiting my boyfriend whose mother had just committed suicide, and how I pulled off on the side of the road when I received an inspiring idea. And I want to continue with that right now. But you might be wondering, well, Rose, why are you telling us about these things that happened to you half a lifetime ago? What's that got to do with now? What's that got to do with you? Those are great questions. For me, nothing that's happened in my life would have unfolded the way it has if I hadn't driven off the highway on that particular day in order to write that idea down. It was a seed idea that grew into something much bigger. And actually, it was quite unusual for me to do that because I've become someone who likes to take the journey a bit more slowly now. I like to dawdle and stop and sit down or, enjoy the journey. But at that time, I was a person who I just liked to get from A to B as quickly as possible. So I'd set off on a 6-hour journey and I wouldn't stop. That was my normal way of being in those days. But on this day, this idea that dropped into my mind was so compelling, so exciting to me, that I just had to stop and write it down. And that's the point I want to make today, is that, ideas and inspirations come to us all the time. The universe is abundant. We're being showered with inspiration all the time. But what makes the difference between whether we're actually able to take that inspiration and work with it and make something out of it, whether it's what we make out of it is our life or a work of art or whatever, or a project, whatever it is, we have to be receptive. We have to listen, and we have to be willing to actually pay that idea some attention, give it some attention. And in my experiences, the ideas that have actually grown into something bigger have been ideas that I've fallen in love with. And I think I've written 4 full-length books now and lots of other writing. My experience is that in order to actually find the motivation to go through a project as big as writing a book, I have to be in love with it. I have to be devoted to it. So when an idea comes along that excites you so much, just pay attention, stop, write it down. I learned that actually through writing poetry. When I was 28, I started to write a lot of poetry, and I discovered that a line of poetry would just kind of drop into my consciousness, and if I didn't write it down, I would forget it. But when I received everything that I was being given, kind of gives a message to the soul that you're interested in what your soul is wanting to tell you. You're interested in receiving the abundant gifts that are there for you just by paying them that little bit of attention. So with the poetry, I would write down a line and then another line would drop in and I write that down. So I received everything. I didn't stop and judge it and say, oh, is this a good idea? Is that not a good idea? I just write it down. And then later I would form it into something else. Then later I would do the sort of, the editing, the judging, the picking this out and discarding that. But in the first instance, I've learned to receive everything that comes. And when what is coming into my consciousness has a lot of energy, has a lot, when it comes with excitement, that is when I know to really pay attention. So I hope that's useful in terms of your own creative process and what's happening with you right now. Excitement is the power for our growth. And I'll talk more about that the next time. Thanks for listening.